happy Easter. Okay, first off, before we start, I want to give out an invitation, okay? I invite all of you, just to really get our minds onto the significance of Easter, to start just today, go around saying to people, He is risen. And when someone says to you, He is risen, you respond to them, He is risen indeed. Okay, so let's just spend 20 seconds doing it to the people beside you. Just practice, He is risen. Say it to the person beside you. Okay, I'm gonna stop you. Okay, I'm saying risen, R-I-S-E-N, not risen, R-I-Z-Z-I-N, okay? Just stop saying that. Let's try it, okay. So all together, He is risen. He is risen. Perfect. Okay, invitations, okay? As I get older and I'm busier, I have less time, I have less energy, and as a result, I'm constantly saying no to invites. And it got to a point where people have actually just stopped asking me to go out anywhere. And that's a terrible feeling, to become irrelevant, right? And so there's a gross part of me that comes out every now and then when I hear about someone's event. I'm like, wow, thanks for the invite. And they're like, oh, you wanted to come? You can come. And I'm like, no, I didn't say that. I wanted the invite, but I would have rejected it, right? And that's why I'm never invited anywhere. Anyways, a few months ago, I got an invitation of a lifetime. I was tired that week, right? Needed a break of some sort, and I get an email inviting me to an all-inclusive family vacation. And I'm like, yes, perfect timing. I am so down. And as I was looking through the email thread, I'm like, none of these people are my family members. And I'm not going to say who, but they sent it to the wrong Tim Nguyen, okay? So it's another family in this church, maybe. So I had a dilemma. You can kind of figure out what it is. I had to figure out, right? I'm like, do I secretly sneak onto someone else's family trip? Or should I just tell the truth and say that's not me, right? And so I'd imagine myself, disguised as this anonymous Tim Nguyen you don't know, just relaxing on a tropical beach somewhere and hanging out with Felix and Jackson. And it was tempting, but I felt convicted by the Holy Spirit in my heart to just say, hey, you got the wrong guy, and I rejected the invite, and that was hard. We are always being invited to something. Always, at all times, constantly. As you're watching YouTube ads, or you see other people wearing certain brands, or following trends, those are invitations to buy in, to say yes, to follow. Some invitations are great, okay? Just yesterday, our youth finished 30-hour famine, and it was such a blessing. And the invitation from CCBC for us to collab together, that was one of the best things that happened to Zoe. Other invitations are not so great. Most of them aren't, right? We should say no to those. And we have to be really careful with our responses to these invitations because every single yes we say is a no to a million other things. But the Bible talks about an invitation that is so great that it is worth dropping everything to respond to. What is this greatest invitation? Well, let's read our Easter story today in Mark 16 and see if you can catch where the invitation is, okay? So let's turn to Mark 16. It's a short chapter. It's 8 verses. So, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on, the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, oh shoot, who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb? But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be alarmed, he said. You are looking for Jesus, the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is risen. Thank you. Okay. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you. Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Did you catch it? something weird about the story, something that's welcoming you in. It's the tombstone. It's rolled away. Why was the tombstone rolled away? Was it because Jesus, like on the third day, he came back to life and it was dark, and then he's like, guys, I'm alive, let me out! Like, don't bury me here, right? No, Jesus' resurrected body could go through that tombstone. The tombstone was rolled away not for Jesus' sake, it was for the sake of the women. It was an invitation to come into the tomb and see what was there, or what wasn't there, or who wasn't there, to see a whole new reality, to see something that would forever change them and forever change the course of history. And we are given the exact same invitation to come in and look inside the tomb so that we can know Jesus and be changed by him. So there are 3 parts to our invitation. What is the greatest invitation? 1, to see the real Jesus. 2, to see the real us. 3, to see our real purpose. And we're just going to start with the first here. The first thing the women see in the tomb is a young man in a white robe, and the wording of it suggests that it's an angel. And what does the angel say to him? Do not be alarmed, which is that's like the catchphrase of angels. They're just like, hey, don't be scared. You are looking for Jesus of the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He is risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. See, the women expected a dead Jesus. But the invitation into the tomb invites them to see for themselves and to hear the claims of the angels that Jesus is risen. No, don't do it. Jesus has risen so that they could take all this information and consider what is true about Jesus. Is he dead or is he alive? The invitation is the same for us. See for yourself the truth about Jesus. Don't follow Jesus blindly just because someone told you to. But on the other hand, don't dismiss Jesus so fast without critically thinking about it. Okay, this is a bit of a tangent, but I have a friend in Ottawa, okay? And one time, she lives in the ghetto area, and one day, like, all her family was, like, out of town. And she was just upstairs, and she heard someone, like, breaking into her house and getting in. And what happened, and I was like, what'd you do after? And she's like, I went to sleep. And I'm like, you went to sleep? Like, you didn't, like, look for a knife or call for help or anything? And it's just like, yeah, I was just so scared, I went to sleep. And it worked. She's okay. Nothing happened. And I'm just like, oh, shoot, in nature, when animals play dead, like, that is a legit, like, defense mechanism. Okay. But I say that because I'm like, it's hard to live in the truth. Right? The truth is actually scary. It demands change from you. And so that was just a random thought because if your change aligns you better with reality, it will always be worth it because we meet God in reality, not in delusion. Okay, anyways, back. Now I know that we can't actually go to the tomb and then go inside and see no body and there's an angel there. We can ask him questions. But we can do it in so many different ways to investigate the evidence of Jesus. So I want to invite you into this process. It's such a rich experience that dives into like philosophy, ethics, math, science, neuroscience, history, and so on and so on. But right now, just as a sampler, let's do it together, just using our passage. What is some evidence from our passage that points us to believing that Jesus resurrected from the dead? Before we start, I just want to make a note that the Bible, and more accurately, all 66 books of the Bible, are mostly regarded by experts and historians, both Christians and non-Christians, to be reliable historical documents. So with that said, the first evidence that tells us this isn't some made-up story or religion is the fact that the first eyewitnesses were women. Not a sexist remark on my part, it's just back then. If you were trying to give reliability to something, you would never use women as eyewitnesses because back then, women's opinions and testimonies did not matter. Okay, it did matter. If I was trying to start a cult, I would use men, okay? And so why would someone use women? The only reason is because it actually happened, okay? It's a real event. The second evidence is seen in the use of their names. So Mary Magdalene, Mary, mother of Jesus, mother of James, Salome, these names were used repeatedly throughout the Gospel of Mark. Which is really, really weird because if you know anything about the authors back then, they didn't even regard women. They didn't even if they were there, they would just be like, oh yeah, only the dudes were there, right? And so why was this a thing? It was a thing because we have to remember, back then, this wasn't an ancient document, right? This was a current, news source, right? This was a current document. And so this is kind of like an invitation for anyone who hears the claims to say, oh, I want to know more about that. If you want to know more about that, go talk to Mary Magdalene. Go talk to Mary, mother of Jesus, probably dead by then, and Salome and stuff. Figure it out for yourself, right? But the third one is, let's say, okay, maybe this isn't made up, but maybe these people are just stupid. Okay, they might actually just be stupid. We are advanced and smart, and we can think logically. We're scientific, and they're like dumb cavemen that can't even think critically, right? The third evidence against that belief is the fact that over and over and over again throughout the Gospels, Jesus kept saying, yo, I'll die, but I'll come back in 3 days. And in our specific Gospel, he says, meet me in Galilee. Now, is it strange that in our story, the witness who have lived 3 years seeing Jesus' miracle and power, on the third day when he said he'll come back, they are nowhere to be seen, right? They're just in a house moping somewhere in Jerusalem. Wouldn't you think that at least one person would look at their Google Calendar and be like, it's the third day. Didn't Jesus say something about the third day? Let's just check the tomb. What would it hurt? No one did that. Why did no one do that? Because in their minds, there wasn't even the tiniest possibility that it could be true. And yet afterwards, after claiming to see Jesus, they lived their lives for him to the point of death. They are not dumb. They were as skeptical, if not more skeptical, than we are. And yet they experienced something real about Jesus that changed them forever. We'll stop there. I know this isn't proof, but it's evidence. Where does the evidence lead? This is a historical approach to seeing the real Jesus, but there are so many different ways to go about it, and I encourage you to just look into it, right? It is so interesting. It is so life-giving. It will satisfy your curiosity. And when we are able to see Jesus as he actually is, and not what we assume about him, like a dead or a powerless or a fictional Jesus, it changes the way that we actually see ourselves. Let's read, that's our second point. We are invited to see the real us. Let's read our verse 7. But go tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you. Do you notice something kind of weird about the way this is phrased? Disciples and Peter. Peter is a disciple. This is redundant, right? This is actually redundant. That's like me saying, hey, everyone in this room and Joe, you're all invited to Blaze Pizza after, right? Joe is already in the room, right? That is redundant. It makes no sense for me to single him out unless I tell you that a few days ago, Joe, who has always told me that he was my best friend, when I needed him most, in my darkest, hardest time of life, he ran away. He backstabbed me. He was ashamed of me. Only then would me saying everyone and Joe would actually make sense, because Joe and maybe even others would assume that he wasn't invited because of what he had done to me. That was hypothetical. He didn't do anything to me. He's great. Okay. That's Peter. Right? That's Peter. Jesus knew if the message was simply directed to the disciples, then Peter, who had always claimed to be his most loyal disciple for years, and who just 3 days ago denied Jesus out of shame and fear, Peter would have said, there's no way Jesus means me. He must hate me. You guys go ahead, I'll stay here. For you Avatar Airbender nerds, think Zuko and Uncle Iroh. That feeling, okay? Jesus knew this is how Peter would react. But Jesus didn't see Peter as simply his actions or his successes or his failures. He loved Peter before any of that. And that allowed Peter to see himself as he actually was, someone loved by God, so that he can live from a place of love now instead of for love. And I think this has such weight for us nowadays. Has anyone ever been to a Vietnamese nail salon? Yeah, me too. Okay. It's crazy, okay? The workers there just talk smack about their clients right in front of them in Vietnamese, okay? Years ago, I went to a Vietnamese salon to get a haircut. Obviously, what were you thinking? They talked to me in English for a little bit, and then they started talking to each other in Vietnamese about me, in front of me, right? And it was things like, oh, has this boy been here before? Or look at his hair, he probably tried to cut it himself, which I did. And but it's still hurtful to hear that said so gently. But I was sitting there am I invisible or something? What's happening? Do they not see me? And so later on, this was so satisfying. I said something to them in Vietnamese, and you could see their faces flush with embarrassment, and then they were trying to undo it by calling me good looking and stuff, and I felt so good. It's just đẹp trai is what it is in Vietnamese. But being invisible, I want to bring that up because I think Peter thought that at his very core, he was invisible. He's nothing. He's see-through. There's no weight or substance or value to him unless he puts something on. And I think that we can easily fall into that kind of belief as well. We want to be seen and known and appreciated. So in order to give ourselves substance and value and weight, we grab all these titles and labels, and like a mummy with wraps, we wrap our invisible selves up so that we can be seen and noticed and loved and known. And so reputation and popularity, you wrap it around yourself. Right? Wealth and possession, you wrap it around yourself. Being a good person or a philanthropist, you wrap it around yourself. Love and romance, you wrap it around yourself, right? But as you just dive deeper into this habit and this belief, what happens is that you will naturally wrap your failures and screw-ups around you as well. So being fired from a job, wrap it around yourself. Being too fat or being too skinny, you wrap it around yourself. Failing tests, not finding a romantic partner, sucking at sports, games, lacking intelligence, you wrap all these things around yourself. And so now in this belief, in your eyes, who you are and what you're worth are these wraps, are these bandages that you hide your invisible self with, and your value just goes up and down depending on what these wraps are, and you're stuck in this cycle of trying to be seen and noticed and loved and valuable for the rest of your life. How tiring. How exhausting, right? How defeating. The invitation of the tomb is to see your real self, to take off these bandages and wraps, good and bad, and to realize, like Peter, you're not invisible. You are not your successes or failures. You're known deeply. You're made in God's image. Your story is valuable. You are loved, not because you have made yourself lovable, but because God made you to be in a love relationship with Him and with others. And that frees us so deeply. That frees us from this tiring, exhausting, self-loathing, judgmental game that everyone loses at the end. Perhaps one of the best ways to see your real self and convince yourself that you're not invisible is to notice the bandages, right? Notice the wraps covering you so that you can start taking them off, and they can just be something that you have, not something that you are. What are your bandages? What are your wraps? Both good and bad. What are the labels or the titles in your life that if you lost them would make you feel like you're nothing or invisible? What are the labels or titles in your life that if you lost them would make you feel like you have no life? Find it. Take it off and see that God's image is under those wraps. Accept the invitation to see your real self, the self that God sees and loves and forgives and redeems, the version of you God made you to be, the one that looks most like Jesus. Now, when we see Jesus as He actually is, and when from there we see ourselves as we actually are, then we can see our purposes as it should be, our life and what it's about. And so that's our third point. We are invited to see our real purpose. Not too long ago, my Wednesday small group was talking about a video where a girl was on her period and was asking her husband for some period pads, right? And so there's one with guards and there's one with wings. She's like, get me the pads with wings, okay? The husband comes back with a box of pads and chicken wings, right? And I'm just like, he did not understand the assignment. But I wouldn't have either, right? This is genius. Who wouldn't want comfort food during such a painful and difficult, uncomfortable time? I was totally going to say something like so off-putting, but I'm like, I just don't want the wrath of LCC on me. But they didn't get the women at the tomb also just didn't get the assignment. But now they're invited to see their real purpose in life. Now, let's just kind of imagine, right, for the women themselves, as they were heading towards the tomb, what did they themselves believe about their purpose or about what they were supposed to do, what their life was about? They woke up probably thinking, okay, they want to honor Jesus' dead body because they loved him. They loved him so deeply as a friend, as a disciple, as a mother even. They wanted to mourn for him and weep for him. And in their love for him, they wanted to keep him from stinking and rotting away. And that's just such a beautiful image of the way love responds to loss. But a few levels under that, it was to submit to the tragedy and the hopelessness of death. To say, death, you have won. But they witness the empty tomb, and they hear and they see the angel, and he's like, he is risen. He's not dead. Go, tell the disciples and Peter, not about the message of death, but now about the message of life and hope. The invitation of the empty tomb, Uno reverses, it flips upside down. Their whole belief about what their purpose was. Because instead of submitting to the power of death, the angel gives them a new way to do life. It was to spread life and joy in the face of death and despair. How miraculous, how wonderful. See, I think a life without the understanding of Jesus' resurrection is a life defined by death, whether we know it or not. Let's think about it. For the average, typical American dreamer, right, just chasing success and trying to live their life to the full, what's a possible phrase they might be living by? Like YOLO, okay? YOLO is a phrase you can live by. You only live once. And it sounds kind of nice, like you live once, but behind that, it's like you will die soon. And after that, there will be nothing. So enjoy life now and make the most of every single moment before you meaninglessly fade out of existence. YOLO sounds like it's driven by life and joy and whatever, but it's actually driven by the fear of death, isn't it? But let's just go like one level deeper, okay? When a loved one passes away, what are you losing? What hurts the most? Is it the fact that there's just like one less body on this planet? No, right? It's a relationship being severed from you, being torn away from you. But death isn't the only thing that severs relationships, right? Breakups, divorces, conflict, miscommunication, hate, broken friendships. The list goes on. Those all sever relationships. And so all of those who are like non-confrontational and people pleasers, and you're always trying to seek to be liked and loved and accepted, of course you would. Of course you would. Why wouldn't you? Broken relationships are excruciatingly painful, especially because we were made for relationships. But it's painful because it is death itself, taking on a different form. And so as we talk about this, you can kind of slowly see, right? You can slowly see how death cages us and enslaves us while we are still living. But what does the resurrection of Jesus have to do with that? In Hebrews 2, we see this promise. So that through death, he being Jesus, might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is, the devil, and free those who, through fear of death, were subject to slavery all their lives. Jesus' power and victory over death means we no longer have to fear death. We're no longer slaves to it. We don't have to spend all our life energy running away from death and all its forms, but instead, we walk towards it. Knowing that we have the power of the resurrection in us, we approach death and in all its forms with the goal of overcoming death through life, through love, through Jesus. So that strained friendship that you thought you lost long years ago, when you approached that form of death with the love of Jesus seen in the way he gave himself up to forgive, you can bring that friendship back to life. That resentment for the way life didn't turn out, when you approach that form of death with the hope of Jesus that promises greater contentment beyond circumstances, you can bring joy back to life. That loved one taken away too soon, when you approach that literal form of death with the life of Jesus, you can say, death used to be an executioner, but the gospel has made him just a gardener. We see that the best thing we can do with our lives is to live from a place of Jesus' life, and then from there, spread life and joy in the face of death and despair. We can live each day with God and experience the same power that emptied the tomb. And it's not a comfortable life. I mean, there's death and a tomb involved, right? Those aren't exactly amusement park rides, but it's incredibly fulfilling. It's joyful. It's secure. As we stand in awe of Jesus' victory through his self-giving love, and as we glorify him by giving ourselves away for others just as he did, we find out that we become more like God and also at the same time more fully human and fully alive. And in that, we are living out the reality and the effects of the resurrection. To recap, what we talked about was this. What is the greatest invitation? It's to see the real Jesus so that we may be confident that we are following what is most true about life. To see the real us so that we are freed from trying to cover our shame with titles and achievements. And finally, to see our real purpose, spreading the reality of life over death. Now, just one last reflective thought, because the book of Mark 16 is really weird. It ends like this, okay? Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. This is how the Gospel of Mark ends. Abrupt, terribly. Right? So bad. If this was a Disney movie, it would suck, like even more than that Little Mermaid movie that just came out. But it's not a conclusion, okay? It's not the conclusion of the story. It's actually pulling us right into the story, saying, you see the invitation, the reality of Christ, the reality of life, us, and the reality of life. Will you be like these women and run away? Or will you say yes to life? Let's pray. Father God, you are so, so good. And in your goodness, you saw the way we were stuck, driven by fear of death, and you made a way for us to be driven by the joy of life. Let us continually grow deeper into your life and your love, and give us the courage to work with you in overcoming death with life in all parts of the world, in all parts of our life. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.